What is up, guys, and welcome to the first video of my new channel. And in this video, we're going to be going over my wish list for the iPhone 8, or at least that's what we think they're going to call it maybe. I actually still have the iPhone 6, so as you can tell, this is a really big upgrade for me. I skipped getting the iPhone 7 because I knew that the iPhone 7 was not going to be the big, huge upgrade that it should be. It was going to be the iPhone 8 because that's the 10th anniversary iPhone, and Apple loves to do things with big numbers and anniversaries and things like that instead of just having a consistent update cycle like we would all really love them to do. First, I just want to go over my usage habits of the iPhone 8 because the thing is, and I mentioned this in the other video, is that I'm not going to be like those other technology channels that kind of do things more from a press perspective, you know? They really talk about specs a lot, and they talk about these new features that perhaps you won't really need to use. Everyone says they're going to talk about technology from a consumer's perspective, and in my opinion, they kind of get away from that as they get bigger and bigger. I'm going to do my best to really hold on to that, so I want to go over my usage habits of a phone, just like I did with the iPad, so that you guys can understand where I'm coming from with all the things that I'm hoping for. I'm going to be using this as a productivity device. I'm currently a college student. I really want to be an entrepreneur, and I'm just a person just like you guys, wherever you are sitting, wherever you are watching this video. I also use it for a lot of media consumption. Social media, yes, but not as much as maybe other people. I don't really use Twitter, although I'm probably going to have to for the sake of this YouTube channel. Listen to music on, especially when I'm at the gym or in the car going somewhere, and I do check up on the news with it. I use Snapchat specifically a lot. Actually, I would say I use Facebook for news and also just social networking, and then I use Snapchat below that. And those are really the two biggest social media, traditional social media platforms that I use. Of course, I use YouTube. I'm on YouTube all the time. But in terms of micro moments and getting your news, you can't really just watch a YouTube video in public so much. It's just much easier to use Facebook or something like that. Okay, so I do have a DSLR. I'm recording on it right now. I have the Canon Rebel T6i, amazing camera. But when I'm out, I'm obviously not going to take this. It's not that big of a camera, but it's a decent sized camera that I'm not just going to take it around with me. So I will use my phone to take pictures on when I'm out and don't want to bring my camera. And the camera needs to be really good, but we'll go more into that in a little bit. I also use it to keep my life in order. Things like the calendar app, the reminders, especially the reminders. And I use the notes app a lot. I use a lot of other, apps to keep my life in order, I guess you could say, but we won't go into them here. I use it for communication, such as texting, things like that, and email. And I always love trying new apps. Also, as I mentioned before, I own my own business, so I use it for keeping track of what's going on there, especially checking my email, checking the website, making sure everything's okay, and communicating with people. All right, guys, so now we're going to get into the wish list of this phone for me. My first wish on this list, actually, just like the iPad rather, was that we have the same pricing structure. Currently, it starts at $200 with a 2-year contract. The rumors suggest that the iPad or iPhone could cost upwards of $1,000, which would be up from whatever it costs now, which would probably mean that either the monthly cost goes up or the $200 up front goes up, or both go up. This is a problem because either I won't be able to get it, which still with an iPhone 6 I really do need it, or I'd have to save up for longer and wait longer, which again, still iPhone 6 I need it, or I'd have to get a lower tiered version of it, which I don't want to do because I should be able to get the normal, model for whatever the money would be usually. I think in terms of pricing, now keep in mind also, I'm an advertising major at college, so we talk about pricing and whatnot a lot, and we talk about brands and whatnot. And I think unless this is going to be a sub-brand, which is kind of like what the iPad was, so the iPad Pro is a sub-brand within the iPad brand, and an iPad Mini is also a sub-brand, so is the iPad Air, etc. So unless this is going to be like that, in which case Apple can change the pricing structure because it's a new sub-brand within their main brand, I think it should really hold true to the same pricing structure within the brand that Apple's already set forth in previous models. All right, so the next wish that I have is the camera. I would like an upgraded camera, which of course Apple comes out with an upgraded camera every year, as does every other manufacturer. However, the point that I want to make here is that there's always a lot of competition between phone manufacturers and who has the best camera and whatnot. And in my opinion, I don't really think Apple has to go far and away and completely shatter the market in terms of cameras here. But I think it's important that every time Apple comes out with a new phone, they should be outdoing their competition. Just like every time their competition comes out with a new phone, they should be outdoing Apple, right? And I think it should be this kind of like a seesaw, like a back and forth, like a ping pong match, right? Of each company outdoes the other whenever they release something new, because they don't release the same new things at the same time, right? So there's going to be a time, like for example, Samsung came out with the Galaxy S8. That phone, right, is better than the iPhone 7. But when the iPhone 8 comes out, it might not be better than the iPhone 8. It would be, at the very least, should be compatible or like even, right? So I think that yes, Apple should upgrade the camera. I don't really care how they do it. I just want an upgraded camera, because when I go out and I take pictures, not that this camera is bad, but it's not great, especially in low light. If I had to actually like specify what about this camera I want to be better, I'm sure the iPhone 7 is already better than this, but I would love better low light photography and videography as well. My next wish is an edge-to-edge display, but very important, I don't want it to be curved. I know it's like trendy right now to have a curved display, but to be honest, I just don't like it. I don't really think that that part of the display that's curved is of any use. Maybe Apple can come up with some crazy use for it that we just haven't thought of yet, but until that happens, if that's not going to happen at least, I just don't really care for it. The next thing is more battery life. Now with the iPad, I did also mention this in my iPad video, and yeah, it's always a concern is battery life, however, especially in phones, because people are increasingly on their phones more and more. Even in the past year, I found that I'm on my phone even more and more, and actually the other week, it was the first time that my iPhone 6 ever needed to be charged in a day. Like usually I don't really use my phone enough to need to charge it, like not nearly as much as other people, because I usually use my computer, but regardless, better battery life is just, it just has to happen. The next thing on my wish list is the latest in communications technology. Now, whether this be 4G or 4G advanced or 5G or whatever it is, I'm not really too like knowledgeable on the connectivity or connections, like communication technology chips and whatnot. But regardless of that, I think that Apple really should put in the latest of whatever is available out there. I know Apple has this like tendency to only do what they see the market has proven a desire for or a need for or whatever, but that's just not how innovation happens. I think innovation happens when everyone collectively, all the different companies, throw whatever they can at the wall, and what sticks, sticks. What doesn't, doesn't. But Apple seems to not want to do that anymore. They do all that internally, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but they are really, really slow about it. And they kind of wait until other companies have done it to see if they want to do it. Currently for the iPhone 7, the storage goes from 32 gigs and as a base option, and then it jumps all the way up to 120 gigs and then 256. I would also really like Apple to make that baseline option not 32, but rather 64 gigs. I think that just makes a lot more sense, because 32, not that it's not that much space, but it's not that much space. So I think it would make a lot of sense if they made it 64 gigs, and I just think it's time. A few general spec updates that I want, even though I already mentioned the 64 gigs and the latest communications technology and chips and whatnot. I would like more RAM. I'm not totally sure what's in there right now. I think it might be 2 or 3 gigs, but I'm pretty sure the Galaxy S8 has like 6 gigs or something like that. And I know Apple, because they make their software to run on the exact hardware, always has a way of making it work the best, like just as good as the Android versions, if not better, with minimal amounts of hardware. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. However, especially if they're going to charge $1,000 now for the device instead of I think the $650 or something that's right now, I think there better be some crazy, crazy specs. In addition to more RAM, I would also like a better graphics processor. Same thing with the $1,000. If you're going to charge $350 more for the device, I think you better have some awesome specs in there in addition to software. I think it just has to be a complete experience if you're going to charge that much. Because think about it, you're now looking at a laptop. Like you can buy a full-on laptop for the price of a phone, which I guess isn't really supposed to be able to do as much for you in theory. The last thing I want to talk about is the processor, which I guess would be the A11 coming up next. The A10 was introduced with the iPhone 7, so I guess that would mean that the A11 is coming up next. Also, as a side note, do you think the iPad Pros or the iPad Pro 2 will be skipping the A10X? Because currently they use the A9X, right? But they never got the upgrade for the A10X. And if Apple is going to come out with, or introduce, or like announce or whatever, the iPhone 8, we think it'll be called, really, really soon with an A11 chip, right? Would they skip the A10X for the iPads and just go straight to the A11X, right? Because it doesn't really make any sense for the latest version of the iPad Pro to have the not latest version of the processor that powers it. Thanks for watching, guys. If you're not already subscribed to my channel, then hit that subscribe button down below. If you are subscribed to my channel, or if you're not anyway, hit that like button, and don't be afraid to comment if you think that I forgot anything on my wish list. All right, guys, see you in the next video. Take care. Peace.